All right, guys, what's up? This is your boy Montre. I did a DNA test. I've done two, and this is not going to be your usual revealing because I've already looked at it. But I've done two DNA tests, one with Ancestry.com and also one with Family Tree DNA. And they're very different. They gave me different results. I'll compare and contrast. Also, because I'm a Black American, I just kind of want to bring attention to a lot of things, a lot of stuff that a lot of Black Americans are not showing, or a lot of what we're not paying attention to. And it tells a whole story, and and because a lot of Black Americans don't know the whole story, or we only know part of the story, we only focus on one thing, is which is mostly the African side, which is a very big chunk of it. A very big chunk of it, only because it's the most recent. But what Ancestry DNA and what it's not going to tell you is one, where your ancestors have lived. It's telling you where they originated from and where you have the most DNA similarities to people in certain areas. But it doesn't tell you where they have moved to, where they have migrated to and through, and where they may live right now. You may have ancestors that live in different areas. For a lot of people, and because you only get half of your DNA from your parents and you only get a quarter of that from your grandparents, a lot of people are missing out and saying that they don't have something in their family, or this proves, they get their DNA results and said, this proves that I don't have this in my family. When you do have things in your family that may not show up on your DNA test because you didn't inherit it. So, for instance, you may have Native American in your family. You just didn't inherit anything from that particular person because maybe you only had one or two people in your family, or you only had Native American from one person on one side of your family, and it didn't show up on your DNA test. So a lot of people are using it as proof that, oh, I don't have Native American, when you have stories of Native American. Those stories may be, in fact, true. And I subscribe to the thought that many of us, many Black Americans, we do have Aborigine heritage or lineage here in America. And I'm going to show that in several different ways. But first, I just want to show you my DNA results and go through my family history very briefly. Well, not briefly, because it's going to take a minute. So if you don't have time, then don't worry about it. So let's look at my results. This is from Ancestry, first and foremost. Excuse me. The DNA story. Mine looks a little bit different from some people's that I've seen online that were sharing their DNA test. Sorry, my computer's going a little slow. I'm doing this whole screen sharing thing. I'm a little. Okay, so this is the first thing. Your DNA doesn't change, but the science we use to analyze it does. Your results may change over time as science improves. So what this means is that nothing's cut and dry with it. Like I told you before, just because it's saying that we have the DNA connections to certain regions, that's just saying the origin of those people and where the majority of those people are concentrated. So Ancestry puts your connections according to the people that are living there today. So it tests people in Africa, it tests people in South America, yada, yada, yada. So, and also if you are only a percentage of your ancestors. So I get half of my DNA from my father, half of my DNA from my mother. Then, so out of four possibilities, I only get two. Hopefully this acts right. Sorry. All right, so let's look at this. My mouse is triple clicking for some reason. So let me move my head over here. There we go. All right, so my DNA test came out to be 31% Cameroon, and I figured that much. 23% Mali, 13% Ireland, Scotland, Wales, 10% Benin, Togo, and 10% Ivory Coast, Ghana. Now that's not completely 100%. I do have some low confidence regions. I was kind of surprised about the Ireland, Scotland, Wales, but not really. Of course, most Africans or African Americans or Black Americans, as I like to say, Black Americans, because African Americans just it sounds weird because it's a continent. Um, you more likely to call me Cameroonian, but I'm not from Cameroon. I'm from America, and I'm just going to show you this. So I have an ancestor, and I know the stories. We have family stories. We actually tell stories in our family. That's why I'm a writer. And they're going to say, "Oh, it's because the slave master raped folks." This is not always the case. A lot of people don't know a lot of stories about white slaves in America. And I actually have an ancestor that was a white slave, and she was a female. She didn't have parents. If you had children out of wedlock, most likely they would put them because you didn't do that. You didn't do that back then. Illegitimate children, they would just put them on the farm with the rest of the slaves, and they were raised with the slaves. She ended up marrying a black man, and she had mulatto children. But because that's 13% and that's so strong, that means it's a very recent relative, probably in the 1800s. So that's probably her. 31, 23%. It doesn't mean that I have recent ancestors from Cameroon and Mali. It just means that the majority of my ancestors have a strong concentration of Cameroon and Mali. So, because of the slave trade and stuff, everybody has that in common, and most Black Americans they do have that in common. But this is not how you should read it, because this is the most recent, your most recent ancestors, and that's during the Atlantic slave trade and stuff like that. That's the most recent historical thing that we pay attention to. If you want to know the whole story, you got to go even further back, because what I've been noticing from a lot of Black Americans and their tests, they all come up with this 2% Asia. Also, this 1% Iberian Peninsula, North Africa. I have less than 1% Polynesia. Okay, so let me tell you about this. The more generations that go by, um, the less percentage it pops up. Okay, so remember that. The more generations that pass by, the more generations, 4, 5, 10 generations go through, then that means that the less percentage that these pop up as. No, I don't want to take a survey. So, my oldest ancestor on this whole thing is going to be African Southeastern Bantu. And most people are going to get that result. You're going to get some white people with the African Southeastern Bantu. Some of them, not all of them. You're going to get a lot of Puerto Ricans. You're going to get everybody. They're going to get the African Southeastern Bantu, or they're going to get that hunter-gatherer. That's African South hunter-gatherer. They're going to get one of the two. Okay? But my oldest ancestor is less than 1% African Southeastern Bantu. And what does it say here? South Africa, Kenya, Nambia. The Southeastern Bantu region shares a genetic spanning thousands of years, thousands of miles through the heart of Africa. As West Africa's population grew about 3,000 years ago, the Bantu people migrated in two directions. Some went along Africa's west coast, others headed east across the continent, then turned south. Okay? So remember that. So you have an origin right there. Sorry. Excuse me. My voice today. So the beginning of this story starts in Africa, Southeastern Bantu. The next percentage is less than 1% is Polynesian. Let me move my head again. Now, Polynesia is way over here by Australia. But you got to see how far this spans out. This goes from over here by New Zealand and Australia. This is the South Pacific into Hawaii and the islands over here. And you see how close that gets to the Americas? It gets hella close. Now, because this is so far away, so long ago, this is way before, and this is what I believe. This happened way before. My oldest ancestor on this is from Polynesia, or that area, those islands. And it is my belief that this is way before the Great Flood. Now, depending on where you date the Great Flood at, this is where these people got to these islands. Because how did the people of Hawaii get way over there in Hawaii? There had to be more islands to connect this whole thing. They didn't just pop up and appear in Hawaii just by magic. There had to be way more islands connecting this. And I'm sure, and I'm pretty positive, those islands came over here into America. The Bering Strait used to be connected. People would go through here. So there are some evidence that perhaps the Polynesian people came to the Americas a long time ago. And that we have some ancestors that may have been in the Americas that were related to the Polynesians. Let's take a second. See, it's triple clicking. Let's take a second and look up the South Pacific people. Let's look at some images of them. There's plenty of, excuse me, I farted. There's plenty of people who've been doing research that the indigenous people before Columbus looked black. If you look at these people, they're mostly dark skinned. They may not be your typical Native Americans, but these are your Aborigine Americans. These are the ones that are related to the Samoans, South Pacific, area. You see that these people got kinky hair. They're dark skinned. Some of them are blonde, but if they were in America, they would be typically, if they were in America today, they would be considered black people. Okay? But these are South Pacific people. Let's look up, what is that? What was the other origin? Polynesian. And Polynesian are people, and these South Pacific people are closely related. You have the Rocky Dad had afro. A lot of Polynesian people come in all shapes and sizes. You have some with kinky hair. You have some with afros, like right here. These are the Polynesian people. And I have an ancestor that's Polynesian. So at least one long time ago, this popped up. And look at this. These people have afros. They have dark skin. And it's my guess that these people were in America way before Columbus. I have at least one ancestor way long ago that's popping up on my results. That's less than 1%. And because it's less than 1%, where else would he come from? What is it? Was it the slave trade? Okay. So we move on. I also have less than 1% in Africa North Africa. So what was going on? This is another old relative. Remember, more generations that passed by. This means that this had to be one of my earlier ancestors. So you have the Moors. So we're talking about right now. We're talking about what, the 1200s, the 1300s. The Moors were during this time. This is the area that they resided in, was in North Africa. So this was Morocco, West Sahara, Libya. and when the Moors ruled the world. So I have some connection with the Moors and the Iberian Peninsula. Spain, Portugal. The Moors were also in Spain and Portugal. I obviously have an ancestor that resided in that area or originated in that area. They may not stayed there, but the Moors were definitely in Spain and the Iberian Peninsula. I'm Rh negative too, so that also connects me to those people over there where Rh negative blood type is highly concentrated. So that may be where that comes from, but that's a long time ago. But that's my Iberian Peninsula is 1%. So it gets a little bit closer. So we're going, even though that's a relative that's still a long way, it's 1%. It's probably one person. It's probably, with 1%, it's probably closer to the 1700s. So we're talking about perhaps America's or the United States is maybe already discovered. But during the Moors that came from the Iberian Peninsula. They were drove out from the Iberian Peninsula and they scattered abroad. Then we get Asia South, 2%, and we get a lot of Black Americans who have that 2% Asian, and they don't know what that means. This is India. Okay, the Moors did go to India. Let's look at this because you guys don't believe me. Y'all think Asia and y'all think Chinese folks. So let's look at Sri Lanka. This is where the people of Sri Lanka, and there are people in India that are darker than me. Okay, there are people that look at these people. These people are dark. Look at these people, then look at me. Okay, so these people are dark. Some of them, that dude's way darker than me. He could be black. So we have the people, the Moors had gone to India, and there's definitely proof of the Moors being in India, and mixed with these people as well. So you have a large array of Indians that are very dark skinned. Actually, there's so many shades of skin tones in India, it's ridiculous. Uh, but, they're about as diverse as Black Americans, Uh, but the Moors definitely mixed with them. So I have at least one relative that originated in India. Did they stay there? Did they stay in the India area, Sri Lanka, that area? No. What did they do? Do we have proof that the Moors in India um, came to the Americas and not necessarily North America? Because I told you I have some family connection to the Caribbean. I have family connection to the West Indies, and I'll show you this tree DNA. Uh, Everybody who's in the West Indies that does a ancestry DNA test, it's just going to tell them that they're from Africa. It won't tell them where these people have lived. Family tree DNA will tell me who I have the most connection with and what country they live in. Okay, so it tells me presently where these people are from compared to where they have tested. So and I tested on my father's side. This is only on my father's side. I do have some West Indian on my mother's side, but I didn't test that because it's a little bit harder because I'm a guy. So as you can see on the family tree DNA test, it's a little bit different, but I got exact matches for my Y chromosome on the island of Grenada. Okay, an exact match. Here it is, exact match right here, Grenada, and then the United States. Some probably got a cousin somewhere. Exact match. Then, but I also have matches in Cameroon, England, Ireland, Mexico, Saudi Arabia. None of these popped up on Ancestry.com because although these people may live in Mexico, Saudi Arabia, United Kingdom, I even have 3 matches, Native American matches. They don't pop up on my DNA test because, like I told you before, everybody that's in your family is not going to pop up on your personal DNA test. Okay, so I have at least 3 matches from my Y chromosome test, Native American. I have one from Ireland. I did get the Irish pop up on mine. I have two from Cameroon, one from Mexico, and there's Mexicans who have African DNA or African heritage. So I definitely have some cousins pretty much all over the planet that are pretty close and match with me. So they just didn't pop up on my personal DNA test. They do pop up on this one as me being related to people in these different countries. Let me go back. And I say more specifically, oops, I didn't want to go that far back. Let's go back forward. Let's go forward. I want to say specifically, let's see if this will show me the matches. I want to show you, no, that's not what I want to show you. Uh, a couple of people who've matched with my DNA, ancestral origins, matches map, migration matches. Was it this? Let's look at that again. A couple of people that matched with my DNA, they were from other places, and I think it's going to show me here. But I'm trying to find it. It was showing that a few other people that had matched with my DNA were from Jamaica, and there was another one from Puerto Rico. But like I said, that stuff is not going to pop up because if it's only one or two people, the likelihood of it popping up is less. But as you can see on that test, I had a lot of people popping up from Grenada. I had an exact match from Grenada. That means that I have uh, a very recent relative that is from Grenada. And the Grenada people have a strong Ghana heritage. So they migrated to, or they got pulled into Grenada from the slave trade from Ghana. So I'm 10% Ghana. So that could be right there, and that's on my dad's side. So that's why it's so low. I have Cameroon on both my dad and my mother's side, so it's a little bit higher. I have Mali as well on both sides. So if it's just only on one side, it comes up like 10%. So Benin Togo is probably just on my mother's side. Ireland is just on my mother's side, and Ghana is just on my father's side. So far, or at least that's what I'm assuming. 3% hunter gatherers. That's pretty high, and that's why I was saying this is earlier. Hunter gatherers, Africa South. I don't even like the hunter gatherer. What does that mean? Is that they're not cavemen? But Africa South, that's 3%. That's a pretty high percentage. So this is a little bit more recent. Great Britain 2%, Europe West 2%, and Nigeria 1%. That means this ancestor not only was a few generations ago, but this is probably one of the earlier ones. So we went back to Asia South. We said the Moors from Asia South. I'm going to assume that there was a migration somewhere from Asia into back into Nigeria. It could have been that relative going from here into the Caribbean, and we can Google that. Let's Google Indian East Indian people in the Caribbean. There's a strong history of East Indian people in the Caribbean. They're all over. They're in Jamaica as well. Trinidad. Okay, let's see. The East Indians of the Caribbean. Let's look at that. Trinidad. And a lot of people would say that I look like I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Everybody's always asking me, where am I from? Let's see. The East Indians of the Caribbean and the Caribbean Rim countries are the descendants of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. Despite their name, they are no relation to the indigenous Aboriginal Indians who inhabit or formerly inhabit the area. The East Indians are, along with the Black Afro Caribbeans, one of the major ethnic groups of Trinidad and Tobago. So my guess is because I have that 2% East Indian, is that connection is somewhere in the Caribbean. Is that I have a relative somewhere in the Caribbean that, let's see, that came to the Caribbean. Indians were first brought to the Caribbean from the mid 1840s to work on white-owned sugar plantations as indentured labor to replace newly freed African slaves. Well, looks like I got another Indian slave my ancestry. But yeah, I got East Indian. That's at 2%. And this is what I'm saying. Like, it all started in the Caribbean. Oh, look, here it is, Grenada. Oh, I got this is where I got connection. There were also East Indian communities in Jamaica. One estimate for 1980 gives the East Indian population of 50,000. Grenada and the French islands. Oh, that makes more sense. East Indian communities in Grenada. There's a connection, y'all. So I have Cameroon and East Indian. One of my oldest relatives is from East India. So somehow, maybe he got into Grenada somehow as an indentured servant and then mixed with the African people there. Okay, so we got that. So Asia south of 2%, Nigeria, we got that 1%. So somebody from Nigeria came in. Then you have the Europe West. Europe West consists of Belgium, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland. Oh, Lord have mercy. That's the rest of Europe right there. But I was probably doing the slave trade. Great Britain, 2%. And then the African South African, that's 3%. So after that, you get to 10% Ghana. And I'm thinking that is basically the island of Grenada. And Benin, Togo, Ireland, I know who their ancestor is, Mali, and Cameroon. And that is the slave trade into Virginia. So what we have here, let me go and zoom in. This is what I'm thinking, y'all. My eldest, well, no, not zoom in, zoom out. My oldest ancestor is from this area. I'm thinking before the flood and before all of that, there was a line of islands here, and they migrated into this area. Okay. Then you have my next ancestor. Well, stop zooming. Are from these areas, and they migrated up to into here, and into these areas, and into these areas. Okay. And we were talking about the Moors, and the Moors getting ran out of Spain, and then you have the Moors in India, and from India, getting into these areas of the Caribbean, where we get back into our 1800s. Of course, like I said, the DNA tests are not going to tell you about this entire history down here. Even though all these black people, a lot of black people, have a lot of culture and history down here in the Americas, down in the Caribbean, but those DNA tests are not going to tell you all of that. You just got to put the two and two together. Where does this 2% of India come from? Where does this Polynesian come from? Where does all that come from? So it just doesn't stop there. It doesn't just pop up. So we're not just all African. We're not all European, but this India and Polynesian this Asian heritage comes back even older. So we have ancestors that were here in America. They may not be Native American because they're not related to the Native American Mongoloid Native Americans that are present today. Um, and even if you are related to them, they may not pop up on your DNA test because we have more African. So the most recent and the most potent is the African blood. At least for me, is Cameroon and Ghana, and only 1% Nigerians. So good because I don't really like Nigerians like that. Boop. But I said all that just to show you different tests because on this one I have way more locations. I have Grenada, United States, Cameroon, England, Ireland, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, United Kingdom, Native America, and then Grenada pops up on my 25 marker again. So I was like, well, why does Grenada keep popping up on my test and it's not popping up on my Ancestry DNA test? And that's mainly because they're not testing for location. They're not testing where these people may have lived for 100 years. And this is how I feel. I don't claim, oh, I'm Cameroon because I got the majority of my DNA matching is from Cameroon. I understand that I have some Cameroon ancestors, but my family has been in the Americas longer than that. Even though we all have the same DNA of Cameroon, my family has been in the Americas way longer, and some of them have probably been in the Caribbean way longer. So I consider myself a Black American, point blank. Not African American, no more than somebody's going to call themselves European American or South American American. What? I don't get it. But I'm a Black American because my ancestors have been here more than 5 generations, probably 10. My ancestors have been here in the Americas probably more than 10 generations. So this is what I consider home, my homeland. And they may have originated from Africa, but what Black person, whether they're from Sri Lanka, whether they're from Polynesia or the Polynesian area, South America, or the Caribbean, if you test any of those people, they're going to get some African in them somewhere. So trust me on that. Anyways, y'all, just giving you my DNA test. I know I went probably way too long than you guys care, but that's me. I like to ramble. All right. And hopefully it will clear things up for your own test. You got to start with a little percentage because that's your oldest ancestor. Okay? That's your oldest ancestor. And then you got to try to put the steps together on how did they get to where you are now? So there has to be some stair steps. There had to be, some migration somewhere. So especially if you're a Black American, if you have that 2% Asian, that is where it's coming from. You probably have some West Caribbean in you somewhere. You probably have some West Indian in you somewhere, okay? Especially if you have that 2% Asian, which is probably India, okay? So this is just my 2 cents. Be sure to leave me a comment below and let me know what you think. If you think I'm totally wrong on this, that's okay. But this is what I'm getting. That the Moors, we're related to the Moors that in Iberian Peninsula and the Indians that were put into indentured servitude, that were brought into the Americas, into the Caribbean. We're related to those people too. And even though it may be 2%, that just means it was an ancestor a long time ago. All right, so I'll talk to you guys later, and I am out of here.